We know, like us, our listeners spend countless hours every week taking care of loved ones, but most probably don't have an estate plan. Sampson McPhee Lawyers can help.
Estate planning allows you to make the big decisions now, like who will take care of your kids if you pass away, and allows you to control how your assets will be distributed and managed.
Estate planning is extra important for parents, common law partners, and people with blended families.
Call Kelly at Sampson McPhee at 902-563-5906 to find out about special pricing for our listeners. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, Jill.
Hi, how are you guys?
Hi, Jill. We're good. How are you?
Good. I'm so distracted. The first hummingbird of the year just came to the feeder right behind you.
That's a good luck sign, I feel.
Yes,
That's a
I
good
think so.
omen.
Yeah.
I want to get some bird feeders.
I was actually just watching a really cool TED Talk on pollination.
Oh my God, Sarah.
And did you know hummingbirds are pollinators?
Yes.
Why didn't I know that? I feel dumb. But it was so this guy's been taking time-lapse videos of pollinators for the last 35 years. And the footage is incredible. And the connection to pollinators to like life on Earth is pretty freaking incredible. And we don't talk about it enough. But Jessica's looking at me right now like, who are you? Who are you? Have you watched a hummingbird in slow motion?
It's amazing.
I have seen it. Yes.
I'm going to send you this TED Talk. It's 8 minutes. It's worth every second. It's incredible.
We cannot be bird watchers like this can't be our future.
It includes butterflies and bees and bats. Did you know bats were
I didn't know
pollinators?
bats were.
Me neither. Quite incredible. Those little suckers come out and dive right into those flowers. Me too. They're terrifying. There used to be one that lived behind the shutters at my parents' house. And he made a little home there and he was quite cute, but it was also quite terrifying to go in their back door at night. So
They're cute from afar, like at a zoo.
Yeah.
Yes.
With glass between me and them.
When I was
made a bat?
When I was in South Africa, I remember I was like at wherever we were and I was having my lunch and then somebody was like, look above, look up. And I looked up and there was like hundreds of bats sleeping, hanging, just,
Terrifying.
And you were like, I was better without looking up.
Yeah.
I was fine.
Thank you. Bye. Lunch is over now. Oh, what a start.
Yes.
It's
a lucky start.
It is a lucky start.
Our little lucky hummingbird.
I love it. That's a good omen for our GYNE episode.
My mom is a big bird watcher, bird photographer. She bought me the hummingbird feeder, so she is going to be so excited. I might just wait and not tell her, and then when she listens to this pod, then she'll find out.
That's incredible. Hi, Jill's mom. First hummingbird. Thanks
There
for
is
getting her
not
the feeder.
enough by Fenton to make me still enough to birdwatch in the world. There just isn't.
You also just don't like being outside.
Yeah, true.
That's kind of
But
crucial.
imagine having to be so still and just watch. Just live in your anxiety. Just just sit in it and just be out in the...
Or maybe it's
but isn't that mindfulness, right?
Yeah, it's calming. Mindfulness.
I can't practice mindfulness. It's too quiet.
It's too still.
It's just too still.
It's too mindful
Can't
for
do
me.
yoga. I'll find an excuse for everything.
Yeah.
But yes, we're here for Wine and Gyne episode 4. We were talking about
3.
Okay, it's 3.
It feels like
4 is
episode
coming
10, but it's episode 3.
But it's episode 3.
Yeah.
It feels like we've done more. Is it just because we've been together more?
I think so. And we're always
We're always in Jill's
talking to her.
office.
Yeah.
And I also think we're all in this time loop post-COVID.
Yes,
True.
that's so true.
Right? What happened when
Yes.
it's all kind of melded together.
That is so true.
Yeah. Well,
The last 3 years is 1 year. It's
yeah, that's true.
It's a time warp.
We're here to talk about contraception.
Yeah.
There we go.
We're having way too much fun with
I
this.
know, it's so fun. Contraception. We're going to talk about what it is, the different types, the different kinds, how it comes into play in all the ways. We have questions from our listeners. We're going to ask Dr. McMullen. She's going to answer them to the best of her ability. But as always, we are sharing general information about the world of contraception. None of this is individualized or should be taken to your specific circumstances, but it's always an encouragement to learn more and ask more questions and seek your own individual treatment and advice. And I think maybe
the three of us were talking before we hit record, like we've all had varying experiences with contraception and other things. And I think it's a real lesson that chatting with your friends about it is awesome, but you shouldn't compare yourself to the next person and try to normalize your experience based on that, because everyone goes through these things differently. Is that fair, Jill?
Absolutely. I would say that's kind of the disclaimer.
Yes.
Before this episode is that of anything really in the world of gynecology that I do, probably contraception is the one that is the most individualized.
So interesting.
In terms of people's goals, what they want from a contraception, and also how they're going to respond.
Right.
So again, I love it when people talk to their friends, talk to their family about women's health. Let's normalize it. Let's destigmatize it. But keep in mind that, first of all, you might not know their whole history.
Right.
Second of all, you might not know what exactly they're looking for. Maybe they aren't telling you that they're never planning to have kids. Or maybe they're not telling you that they're planning to start soon. And third, there's individual responses to medications that we can't predict.
Right.
We just don't know. Maybe in 1,000 years when we have the Star Trek scanners, we'd be able to have to be predict and say, like, this is what's going to happen to you. But we're not there yet.
Right.
So, you know, if we're talking about something and it sounds really interesting and you want to talk to your family doctor about it, or your gynecologist about it, or your nurse practitioner, but you've heard bad things from your friends, still talk to it. Still talk about it.
It's
Still
worth the
consider
conversation.
it. It's worth the conversation. And you might decide it's not for you, but don't be scared by what other people say.
Yeah. I know this is a terrible comparison, but hearing you say that, I thought of the example, like, it's kind of like we all drive different cars, and those cars sometimes require different types of gas or oil or different tires or whatever.
Or some people like
it's
an
kind of the
SUV,
same
some people
thing.
prefer a car.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's kind of the...
It's
or
like
is it?
different
No.
things make it work. I don't know. This analogy's off the
I'm like,
rails,
wait,
but
no.
it did make me think, like, you know, not every body reacts to the same input in the same way.
Right.
Like, you have different reactions, different reaction. Is that the right word? Different relationships
Different
with
responses.
these. Yeah. Responses. That's a better word.
So yeah, let's get into it. Contraception, all the things. So just generally speaking, contraception, what is it?
Contraception is just birth control. So it's any method that you are using to prevent pregnancy. And that, as we're going to talk about tonight, is a whole gamut of things. When people hear contraception, we all tend to think about the pill.
Right.
That's the number one thing that you think about.
Method.
I don't think that is that classified?
Or IUD, but it's a whole, anything that you're using to prevent pregnancy qualifies as contraception.
Right.
And so when there's a whole bunch of ways to classify contraception, there's a whole bunch of ways to think about it and organize it in your head. But getting back again to different contraceptions are good for different people. I think the way I start when I'm seeing someone who's coming to me to talk about pregnancy prevention, and probably a good way to organize it for tonight, is to think about it in terms of what your goals are.
Right.
So the very first one that's the easiest is, are you going to have kids in the future? Maybe. Yes or none.
Okay.
If you're 100% sure, then that's going to open up the permanent contraceptive options.
Okay.
But if you're not sure, those are off the table.
Right.
The next step is, what are your goals for contraception? Obviously, you don't want to get pregnant. That one's
Obvious.
pretty clear. But how bad do you not want to get pregnant?
Right.
If you got pregnant, would it be devastating, or would it just be, that's kind of inconvenient, but it's okay?
Right.
And then do you want the other benefits that can come from contraception? Like, do you want your periods less painful? Do you want them less frequent, less heavy? Not at all, because these are all things that can go along.
Okay.
Then you're looking at, are there any reasons that I can't have a certain type of birth control?
Right.
And that is pretty complex. I don't think we're going to get into it too much tonight, beyond a couple questions that listeners have sent in. At the end of the day, that's one of the things that you go to your family doctor, or, again, your healthcare, your primary care provider for, and they will tell you if something's contraindicated or not.
But worth talking about the fact that that does exist.
That does
some
exist.
of them
Right.
may not be right for you
I
because of A,
experienced
B,
that.
and C.
Right. Like I was on, like in grade 11 or whatever, I went on birth control because I had a boyfriend. So it was like, even though at the time we weren't sexually active, I thought that like, that's what you did. Like, oh, I have a boyfriend. I better go to the health center and get on birth control and get my little brown baggie and with my condoms and, you know. And I ended up with migraine with aura.
Yes.
And it was very scary. It was like a mini stroke. It was literally like the numbing, the slurred speech. And then it was learned that I can only take birth control
without estrogen.
Without estrogen.
And that's probably the most common for people who are listening. I mean, like I said, there's a whole gamut of reasons that you absolutely can't have something, or maybe you shouldn't, but you could under certain circumstances. But the number one that I would see would be migraines with aura. And it's not an absolute contraindication if you have migraines without aura. So when we talk about aura, it's just what Jess said. Any of the neurologic symptoms like changes in your vision, numbness and tingling, weakness, slurred speech, anything that's kind of stroke-like. Then if you have those, no to estrogen. If you have bad headaches, but you don't have the aura, that's okay.
Okay. Very interesting. I didn't know that.
But that would be the number one.
And I know, like, obviously, I feel like it's obvious that prevention of pregnancy seems like the number one reason people will be seeking birth control. But as you said, there are different reasons why
So many people do.
people go on it, whether it's pain control, etc., knowing that it still is a prevention to pregnancy, but may not be the main reason they're seeking it out. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I kind of hate that it's called the birth control pill
Right.
or whatever, because I have so many people on it who maybe have had tubals or their partners had a vasectomy and they don't care about preventing pregnancy, but they have endometriosis or they have heavy periods, so they want to be on something. And then we're calling it the birth control pill, but that it has nothing to do with pregnancy. It has everything to do with other beneficial effects that it has. And I would say probably at this point, most primary care providers provide contraception. You don't really need a gynecologist because most family doctors, nurse practitioners, so on, are super comfortable with it.
Right.
It's what I prescribe it most for is periods.
Yeah, interesting. Which is going to
interesting.
be our
And
next
then-
topic of the next one. guys.
I'm also interested to know. So you were saying how like there's 3 questions. Like, okay, so like what are the reasons, right? When you're sitting down and talking contraception with people. I'm curious when you say like absolute no, you planning for no children, you know that's not something you want, very open about that. It's a decision you made. I'm curious if like ever a conversation comes up to be like, okay, have you talked to your partner about a vasectomy? Like why?
Every time you come into my office asking for a tubal.
Just ask Patrick.
But like it feels like it's always on us as women to prevent pregnancy.
Right.
It really
Hello?
does.
Since
Like,
the beginning
There's
of
nothing
sexual
like,
activity.
Obviously, this isn't your scope, but like I wouldn't think there's anything like medically that can come from a vasectomy, like any side effects that come from aside from like a sore penis or whatever or the area, the balls that get like what are they called?
It's actually a safer procedure than tubal ligation or any sort of
And birth
contraception
control.
for women.
Yeah.
So like, come on.
So, and it is actually the most effective.
And isn't that funny?
Contraception.
And isn't there like why isn't there a pill for men? You know?
I don't know. And I actually think that's
they can just get their
disempowering for
balls
men.
clipped.
It is disempowering for
Because men should have the right just as much as us to decide if they want children or
Exactly.
not.
It does
True.
give some control, right? Like
Yeah.
that is, of course.
So, there have been products on and off. It's always something that's in study, but nothing that's been
Right.
has ever come to the market. Will it happen? I don't know. I think men need to be a lot more vocal about wanting it.
Do you think there's like a sociocultural
No
piece to
man
that
is
though?
like, I will get my balls clipped. Like, what man is going to stand in line and like openly do
But
that?
could you take a pill to prevent pregnancy? Different than a vasectomy.
They wouldn't
like,
remember to take the stupid thing.
but I know, but I'm saying maybe like it's such
But it's
a
a start,
cultural,
right? 'Cause
it's
we
such a
started with
cultural
the pill, and
thing.
now we have other things that you
Yeah.
don't have to
I would
remember.
not leave that responsibility on a man.
But then think about any form of birth control for us becomes more effective if your partner is also doing something.
Yeah, that's
100%.
right. So
Like-
it doesn't mean we would stop. It just
No.
means both could be participating in that action, like take responsibility for it.
Yes. And I think this comes down, Sarah and I have been chatting a little bit about this behind the scenes, is that contraception is a human right.
Yeah.
The ability to decide if you want kids, when you want kids, and how many kids you want should absolutely be something that is up to you. And unfortunately, in a lot of places in the world, it's not, or it's becoming increasingly harder to make those choices. And looking back, I mean, contraception is my bread and butter. I think a lot of us, when you go, it's not a super anxiety provoking visit. Like we talk about birth control so much, but really it's a super empowering thing that you're doing. Every time you go to the doctor and say like, I need my birth control refilled, or I want to change it up, you are choosing your destiny.
Right.
You are deciding, hey, this is not a good time for me because of work, because of education. Like this is just not going to help me fulfill my personal goals for my life right now.
Right.
And when we look back in history, that's something that was denied to women for so long.
Yeah.
And they weren't able to because it becomes so much harder to go to school, to climb the ladder in certain careers if you are taking time off to be pregnant.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, that is still punished.
Yeah.
I think it's really, I'm always so, I don't know if proud's the right word or not, but like when someone can openly say, I don't want kids, it's just not for me. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a,
I know.
like, what am I trying to say? Like, not
It's
proud isn't the word.
So self-aware.
But yes.
Yeah.
Like such a
Because-
good understanding of yourself.
Absolutely. Because I think
it's admirable for people to be, confident and sure of themselves and to be able
and
to
what
say
they
that out
want.
loud in a world that doesn't make it very comfortable for you to say that out loud.
Because
right?
people are always like, well, you have to give Logan a sibling.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
No,
no,
you
I
don't.
Yeah.
But, people will say like, oh, have another. And I'm like, how bad would it be if you got pregnant? Would it be like, okay, it's just not a really good time? Or would it be like detrimental? I'm like, it would be detrimental.
Exactly.
Like it can't happen.
Yes. And
That's
that,
where I'm at,
Yeah.
right? I know it would be okay. But like, that's a choice that I've made that's what we want. Like we've had many discussions. So it's like, obviously nothing is 100%. Like abstinence is technically the only thing that can
and it's
pregnancy,
so
but
unrealistic. Like, okay, hopefully you guys don't get any hate mail for this, but this whole thing about banning abortions, it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Humans want to have sex.
Yeah.
We will have sex.
Yes.
You cannot stop humans from having sex. And with sex comes pregnancies.
It's natural.
It is natural. And since
it's a
time
human need.
immemorial, men and women have been trying to prevent pregnancies and get rid of pregnancies. So what contraception does, especially in a world where we're seeing all these rights to abortion getting rolled back, thankfully we're still doing pretty good in Canada, but who knows? It's getting more ubiquitous in the world that people are pushing against abortion. And if you don't have access to abortion and you don't have access to contraceptive options that are good for you, the choice then is have a baby that you don't want or seek an unsafe abortion.
Yeah.
So if we get rid of contraception, if we don't have good contraception, all that's going to happen is more women are going to die unnecessarily.
Exactly.
Let's just wheel back to what Jessica was saying about I absolutely don't want to get pregnant. Getting pregnant would be devastating.
Yeah.
So again, there's ways to think about it. I think a lot of times when people are like, I'm absolutely done, I absolutely don't want to get pregnant, the first thing that comes to mind is tubal. Second is a vasectomy. But from a gynecologist or a gynecology point of view, I'm thinking of the most effective contraceptives because a tubal ligation, a vasectomy, the IUD, and the progestin implant are all pretty much just as effective in preventing pregnancy.
As each other?
They're all in that 99.5% effective.
Wow.
So just because you're 100% done doesn't mean you automatically sign me up for my tubal.
Right.
Because that might not be the best choice for you for a lot of reasons. So let's kind of just go into each one of them. So the permanent birth control is vasectomy and tubal ligation. And we call them permanent because that's what you have to consider. There are reversal procedures for both of them, but they are not 100% effective.
Yeah.
And you're heading back to the OR. And every time you go to the OR, even if you're the healthiest person in the world, there is a risk to that.
And I would say that conversation happens on that end too. Like Patrick got a vasectomy and the doctor, first thing she said was, do you have kids? Do you plan on having more kids? Is there any part of you that thinks you want another? Because if you're here thinking you'll do this now, but get it reversed in a few years, we're not doing it. That's not the way to go into this because that is talked about. Well, we can just reverse it. Well, no.
And also, I hope you have really good insurance because getting a tubal or vasectomy reversed is private pay.
Oh.
It's expensive. And again, vasectomy, not really in my wheelhouse. So I'll speak more about the tubal ligation. After a reversal of a tubal ligation, there are higher risks like having an ectopic pregnancy after.
Yeah,
so treat it like you're sure. And with that said, I know a lot of people come and they want a tubal and they're sure they don't want to have kids or they're young and they just don't want it and they've got a lot of backlash. Personally, I don't care. I don't care how old you are, how many kids you have had, as long as you understand that it is permanent and that there are risks.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main thing for me. But I know there are definitely going to be listeners out there who wanted a tubal in their 20s and who were told no.
Right.
Even though they were sure. And honestly, the risk of regret is incredibly low. If you're under 30, it's about a 4% chance of regret. And if you're over 30, it's about a 0.2% chance of regret. That to me is so small that I don't try to harp on it.
Yeah.
But if you go see a gynecologist for a tubal and they say one of the risks is regret, that is a medical legal thing that we must say.
Right.
We have to say, because there have been gynecologists who have been sued for doing a tubal and then later the person regretted it.
Right.
So we have to say that. We're not saying it to dissuade you. We're saying it to protect ourselves.
Right. And to lay it out on the table. Like, have you considered
Yeah, that's right.
all of these things? Yeah.
So with the tubal ligation, the biggest risks are the surgical risks. So there's always a chance of infection with any surgery, a very small chance of bleeding. The most serious risks would be injuring things that live around the tubes, like the ovaries, the bowel, or the bladder, although that's extremely uncommon. And then risks to anesthesia of going off to sleep. Again, in young, healthy people, that's very, very uncommon. With that said, one of the reasons that a tubal might not be the option for you, even if you're 100% done, would be if you're someone who would be at really high risk for surgery.
Ah.
If surgery would put you at an undue risk.
Right.
That's when you might be counseled, like, I don't think this is a good option because we don't want you to sustain permanent injury or, worst case, death.
Right.
In pursuit of a tubal ligation when there are safer things like vasectomy.
Right.
Or the IUD or the Nexplanon. So again, I'm sure, like, I know listeners, there are people out there who are discouraging you from that for a lot of reasons. The vast majority of you, this won't apply, but that is the case for some people who might be listening, that for you, surgery is just not the safest option.
But there are options equally effective with less risk.
Yes. So let's jump into those guys. So these are, obviously these are my favorite because they're the most effective.
Right.
And if people are coming, that is how my brain works.
Right.
You come to me saying you don't want to get pregnant. I'm like, well, I want to do the most effective
right, not getting pregnant. Yeah.
So the two of them are the IUD and the implant. The only implant we have in Canada is Nexplanon. So I'm just going to keep calling it Nexplanon. But if you go abroad, there are different ones. So progesterone implant, we're calling it Nexplanon. They all have the same risk profile, same efficacy.
Okay.
With the IUDs, there's two IUDs. There's a bunch of different brands, but there's two types. One contains progesterone and one is just copper.
Okay.
They're both as effective as each other. All of these are just as effective as each other, just as effective as a tubal or vasectomy, 99.5% effective. The IUD is a device that's inserted into your uterus and it prevents pregnancy. For the copper IUD, that's it. Full stop. It prevents pregnancy. There aren't other benefits to it.
Okay.
With the progesterone containing IUD, because of the progesterone, we often use it to treat heavy periods, painful periods, irregular periods, endometriosis, so on and so forth.
Oh.
Because about 60 to 80% of women will stop having a period entirely at the 3 to 6 month mark.
Wow. So I always thought IUDs couldn't be inserted in people with
It absolutely can.
Oh.
They can't be inserted in people who have an abnormal uterine cavity. So your uterus is an empty space, obviously, because a baby can go in there.
Right.
The IUD goes into this empty space, but other things like fibroids can push into that space. And there are a few rare conditions that people are born with that affect the shape of the uterus where an IUD wouldn't fit in. And why it doesn't work there is because the IUD is going to be pushed around. It's going to not be in the ideal location.
Okay.
So endometriosis.
Endometriosis, you're good.
So do I have a fucked up uterus then?
No, not necessarily. No, actually, no.
No.
Full on no, because
Jill knows.
I looked. No.
Yeah. Well, mine went on like a shopping spree.
Yeah, but that's bad luck.
Okay.
That was not I would have told you then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just is a higher risk.
Right.
Like we're talking about, going back to the contraindications, like why this might not be an option for you. For example, there's a condition called like unicorn uterus, where you, instead of having a heart-shaped uterus, it's kind of just like almost like an eggplant shape.
Oh.
I would tell someone, if they came to me and I knew they had that, I would say no.
Right.
To the IUD.
Yeah, I would say that's a bad idea.
Oh, interesting.
So you can still so let's get into the IUD complications. So everyone has heard horror stories. And the first one I'm going to jump into, and I think it's an important issue that really has been getting a lot more media attention, has been getting a lot more of my attention. And I think that people don't really necessarily want to admit to as one of the reasons they don't want the IUD is because it hurts to go in. And it does.
Right.
It does hurt.
So what I have started doing is freezing everybody's cervix who gets an IUD or a biopsy. Oh. So for all my patients who had one before I started doing that, I'm so sorry. I really apologize.
It's literally like a contraction.
So what
That's
the
what it
freezing
feels like.
does. So when I freeze a cervix, when someone freezes a cervix, we can makes some parts less painful, but the cramping, not necessarily. So the cramping, the best thing you can do is take, if you're able to, some people can't take Aleve or ibuprofen, but taking an Aleve or ibuprofen 30 minutes before you have your IUD inserted. And then, so that's, I advise my patients, I run on time, 30 minutes before your appointment, you take your pill. Then I put in the freezing. So the freezing is still a needle. It's like if you got something taken off your arm.
I was going to say, how do you freeze a cervix?
It's just a needle. So it's not.
It's just a needle
in the vagina.
I know, exactly. So people.
Just a needle in your vagina.
But that's what it's a pinch and then pressure, which is not comfortable, but it's better than the IUD.
Okay. Yes.
And like, it's a cramp, but it's like a cramp.
It's a contraction. So what is happening is the uterus does cramp down. Your uterus is just a gigantic muscle. That's all your uterus is. It's a muscle. And putting the IUD in, putting that foreign body in, causes it to contract down. What naproxen Aleve does is it prevents smooth muscles like the uterus from contracting. That's why it works for period pain, and that's why it helps with the IUD.
Gotcha.
Right.
That makes sense.
So what the freezing does is helps with the instrumentation part of it. So putting it through the cervix, getting ready, it helps with that. So I can, and then the naproxen, and like it's not 100, the tenaculum that holds your uterus in place. All this sounds scary, but I have been having incredible success with paracervical blocks. Again, nobody wants a needle in their cervix, but nobody wants a needle in their arm.
Right.
Like it's manageable. We've all had them. They suck, but they're okay.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that can be done. So, the pain can be managed with the IUD insertion. So that's the first one. Mm-hmm. But then people have heard a million horror stories from their friends and their family.
Jessica.
In general, yes, Jessica's going to jump in with a horror story for us, which is going to go against what I'm saying, that most people with the IUD are very happy with it.
Well, it's like
we
anything,
tend to hear the horror stories.
You hear the negative parts. Yeah. No one brags about how great their IUD feels. You're just hearing the terrible stories about it.
I feel like I heard 50-50. That's why I was like, I'm just going to go for it because maybe I'm one of the ones that won't have a horror story.
Right.
But it was definitely 50-50. Like 50% of the people I talked to had a horror story. The other 50 didn't.
I think I would have to check again, but I think the literature pans out to more like 20% are unhappy and 80% are happy. But again, I would not have looked at that literature since my exam. So it's been a while. I would say that's probably what I see in my clinic, in my office, but that's just my small representative sample here in Cape Breton. In terms of risks of the IUD, I generally say it's 1% for everything. It's 1% chance of infection, 1% chance of it falling out, and 1% chance of it getting misplaced, either within the uterus itself or migrating through the uterus into the abdomen. And people's eyes go wide. They make faces like Jessica's making at me right now. If it's in the abdomen, that sounds like such a big deal, but it's actually just a day surgery to have it taken out.
Anchored Ideas is Cape Breton's leading marketing and communications agency. Known for their heart and hype, big dreams for Cape Breton Unimoggy fuel their creativity. Here, there is no divide between business and community. Your neighbors and friends may very well also be your family. And when local businesses are doing well, we're all rising together.
For these reasons and more, when the team at Anchored Ideas work with a client, it's personal. They're proud to be there for the big wins, the hurdles, and all the moments in between. They help you build your brand, define your difference, and connect you with those who matter.
This signature heart and hype is the core of everything they do at Anchored Ideas. And we know firsthand that this team of powerhouse professionals are exactly who you need to speak to when trying to bring your vision to life.
Does it just float out? Like what happens? I'm a visual learner. I need to know. I know, but like it's in your uterus, and I picture this like T-shaped thing.
and it's like flies.
So then is it just like it's like the hummingbird? Does it just take off with its flapping wings out of the uterus?
Often it occurs during insertion. That's often when it happens. Or again, if you have an abnormal uterus.
Okay.
If you have fibroids, if you have an abnormal shape, that promotes it going through. And sometimes for people who have had a lot of surgery on their uteruses for whatever reason, to take out fibroids, have had 4 or 5 C-sections, that is going to weaken your uterus. You're not going to have the same strength.
It's so interesting because when I went for the 6-week postpartum checkup on it to check the strings, she couldn't find them. So she sent me for an ultrasound, and the secretary called me and said, like, it's where it needs to be. So we're not going to worry. So the strings, I guess she thought maybe because I'm long everywhere, like I have a long torso. So perhaps she cut the strings too short.
Yeah, and that can certainly happen. So basically, if the IUD is in the uterus, it will prevent pregnancy. If it's not
Yes.
the ideal location, it might not help with periods. But if it's in the uterus, even if it's not in the ideal position in the uterus, it's going to be
Right,
preventing
because
pregnancy.
mine was whatever it was when you found it, but I wasn't. Yeah,
found it.
But it will still work because it's still releasing that progesterone all the time, and
Right,
it's still a
interesting.
foreign body in your uterus that's
right.
discouraging pregnancy.
So I'm thinking it needs to be like perfectly placed, like cutting something off, like a hole, like covering a hole. Like that's how I pictured it. That's how I
Well,
pictured
I was
it.
just going to ask, does it come out of the uterus, like out of a hole, or
No.
does it flow through the side wall of the uterus? Like, how does it escape?
How does it escape? Usually right through the uterus itself, like right
Okay.
through the muscle.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Like,
Like-
the wall.
And you don't even feel it.
Okay, 2 types of IUDs. Copper.
So
What's the other one?
The progesterone containing one. That's called the Mirena, the Kyleena. There was a Jadis on the market, but they got pretty much run out by Kyleena.
Okay.
The copper IUD, fabulous for preventing pregnancy. Very high chance of making your periods worse. Heavier and more painful. Not for everybody, but for a lot of people. So if your goal is to have better periods, or if your periods are terrible, don't do it.
Right.
Don't do it.
Right.
It is a great contraceptive, but if periods are a problem for you
Yeah.
or periods are a concern,
Yeah.
that is not the way you want to go.
I've never had an IUD because that scares me, I'll be honest. But is the idea that are all of them the same in the sense that you get it inserted and you just don't have to worry about it for 5 years? Or what does that look like?
Well, this is fun. So the FDA just approved Mirena for 8 years.
Wow.
And copper is for 13.
What?
13 years, Jill?
What?
So someone can get that inserted
13 years.
and then 13 years later they have to get it changed?
Yep.
Holy smokes.
I would forget about it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that is my thought because I'm already like, when is my next one?
Right. Yeah.
But
I have to look at that too.
yeah.
Let's
I'm
talk
gonna get
about,
it
can we talk
anyway.
about Nexplanon?
Let's
I
jump
think
on
we've
to
all had an
Nexplanon.
experience with Nexplanon.
Yes.
I'm amazed by this. I think it's fascinating.
It is pretty cool.
So Nexplanon is the progesterone implant. So like the Mirena, like the Kyleena, it contains progesterone, but the implant is in your arm.
And
you can feel it. So you know exactly
it's
where
like a
it's at.
matchstick.
Yes.
It's not in the abyss of your uterus. I check
No.
mine every day. Are you where you need to be?
And I think it's fair to say it's like an IUD in your arm.
Yes. It has a lot less. So unfortunately, I get a lot of referrals of people for the Nexplanon because they don't want to have periods. That's not the game with the Nexplanon. The Nexplanon is going to make your periods more irregular. So for some people, it's great. And by irregular, it's like, I can go 6 months and then I'll have 2 periods in a month.
Yes.
But I don't care because I had 6 great months.
Right.
Right.
For other people, it's like lighter, less painful spotting for 3 weeks of the month.
Okay.
So if absolutely not having a period is your goal, this is not the way to go.
Interesting.
Oh, that's good to know.
See, that's how I was with the IUD.
And
Like,
there is a
I
small
had a
subset
terrible
of people who always
experience.
spot with the IUD.
Yeah.
But it's less than with the Nexplanon.
Yeah. Like I think I texted you one time to be like, okay, I just went literally 4 and 5 months without anything. And now I'm spotting what's happening.
Yeah. And
And then it went away for another however many months.
that is like, those are the success stories.
Yes.
And so I would say actually in my practice, Nexplanon is closer to 50-50 than the IUD.
Really?
I mean, I am die hard. Like I plan to ride this puppy till
Yeah.
menopause. Like every 3
Yeah.
years, let's just do this.
Yeah.
But definitely it is not for everybody.
And it is like the infant on the market, right?
It's
like
a baby.
Nexplanon
This
is
is
the
the newest-
newest thing
newest
in
thing.
Canada. Yeah.
It's been around, in case anybody's scared. Oh my God, it's new. It's been around for ages in Europe and the
Yes.
States, but it's very hard to get approval for a new drug or a new medication in Canada, which
I feel
is
like it's a
good and
thing.
bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got plenty of experience with it. It's just newer to Canada.
And
Right.
is it fair to say, because we all have it, I didn't feel it going, like it didn't hurt.
No, you get some
No,
freezing and then
Well, she
Literally-
did, but Jill did both of ours.
Yeah. Jill did it. And she's like, that's it. And I was like, that's
Is
it.
it
What?
done?
And she's
And
like,
we
it's
got a
done.
pretty
I'm
pink
like, it's not,
Band-Aid.
it's not done. And you were like, it's done.
done.
I was
It
like,
was
it
so
can't
quick.
be done. It was like 2.3 seconds.
And you do get a needle for freezing. So basically,
You just
folks
don't
out
look.
there, if
Tiny,
you're
tiny
getting
pinch.
You just don't look.
if that's what you're worried about the needle and you're coming to see me,
Yeah.
whether it's an IUD or an Nexplanon, you're getting a needle.
Yeah.
And we got a new shirt.
It was like my party.
You're getting a
You're
needle.
getting a
You're getting a needle.
It was like my party trick after I got it done. I'd be
Honestly,
like,
I
hey,
do it
want to
too.
feel something cool?
I told
Wanna
you
feel
guys.
it? And I would like push it out a little. They could see the matchstick like point out.
After
in the,
my surgery, thank you, Jill, for finding my IUD in the abyss of my uterus. After my surgery, I was like saying to the nurses, like, check out my arm implant. Touch it. Just feel it. Just feel it. They were like, it's okay. And I'm like, no, just touch it. Because I was high as a kite. And I'm like, no, like, you got to see this.
Please touch it.
I was doing that completely sober to like my colleagues, and people got really freaked out. They're like, please stop. I don't want to touch it. Like, I'm going to throw up.
When I show patients, and they're thinking about it, everyone's like, can I touch it?
Yeah.
I don't care. I can't feel it. You can't feel it.
And there was really like, I had a bruise for a little while.
I didn't
it
even
wasn't
get a
anything
bruise.
crazy.
I was the doctor who do as I say, not as I do, because I took off my pressure bandage right away, and I had a bruise that went down into my arm.
you had a huge bruise. I remember seeing it.
that too. Yeah.
So do what the doctor says and keep your bandage on for the full 24 to 72
I
hours.
was such a good girl and listened, and I did not have a bruise.
I listened, but I had a little bit of bruise, but I bruised like a peach. So I wasn't surprised that I had a bruise, but I don't have mine now. So I had it temporarily after we had the twins, because after Jill told us that the chances of us having multiples again was pretty high, we decided to take an option on that. Yeah, like, okay, we're good. So while we were waiting for Patrick's procedure, we figured we should do something. And Nexplanon, I will say, like, I never was interested in the IUD that scares me and personally, and I could never take the pill. I took it when I was younger, in my like late teens, and it just did not make me feel right. I was like a raging lunatic. So I just made that decision at like 19 or 20 that I wasn't going to do that anymore. And I wasn't on anything again until the Nexplanon. So that was in over a decade, more than that. And then I got it. But I only had it for a short amount of time. So I had it for a few months, and then Patrick
did his thing.
We
should say that was very lucky in a very short wait time, guys.
Lucky.
That was COVID.
That was very lucky.
Like, if you're planning for honey to get a vasectomy, you probably need a game plan until then.
Yes.
Daniel, you better get on the list. I keep telling him, I'm like, would you?
Well, we started the conversation because we knew it would be a long wait time. So we were like, get on the list and, have the conversation. He had his appointment. And then it was just a lucky day because the doctor was like, great, I can see you in 2 weeks. And he was like, for what? She was like, for the procedure. And he was like, oh, wait, what? And he came home and told me, and I was like, wait, what? Are we sure? I thought I was going to have like a year to decide, But I mean, it was what it was. So then I kept it in for a little while afterwards because let it be known that you're supposed to have like a 3-month waiting period after the vasectomy.
And you got to get your sperm tested.
Not number one.
Guys, until that sperm is checked after the semen or after the vasectomy, you don't know. Assume that he is fertile until you get the semen analysis saying he is not.
And then you have to get it tested, and then you get it back, and then it's good to go. So once you got that back, so maybe it was a little more than 3, 4, 5. Maybe it was 5 months.
I think it was
5-6 months.
5, 6, I think.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's closer to half a year.
Yeah.
IUD, we talked about permanent contraception, IUDs and Nexplanon. The one thing I do want to say for IUDs and Nexplanon, because we've kind of lumped it with the tubal and the vasectomy, as soon as you take the Nexplanon out, as soon as your IUD comes out, your fertility comes back.
Okay.
It is right away. So also that is good to know.
That's a difference.
If you're thinking, okay, well, I'll take it out and then maybe I'll have a couple months. Okay, condoms.
Okay, this brings us to one of our questions, actually.
So let's jump right into it.
Because one of our questions someone wants to know is, what is the best contraception for postpartum when you want another baby, but not right away? So this person had a baby in the last, let's say 9 months or a year. They know they want to try again soon, but not right now. What is the best contraception for that period of time?
So again, multi-pronged. I feel like that's just the story with contraception. Really, the only ones that I would say do not do would be Depo-Provera, because it can have up to a year before your fertility comes back. And obviously a tubal ligation or a vasectomy, but it bears saying. That said, any of the others are fine.
Okay,
IUD,
so
the pill too?
The pill, any of those would be fine.
The pill wasn't.
But
I thought the pill took longer to.
It takes a little bit longer, but not like a year. Like a couple of cycles. So it's not that long. My caveat for that when I'm counseling a patient, and anytime you guys ask these questions, I kind of try to like create a scenario in my head, would be if someone is coming to me in that scenario and they don't have private drug insurance. There is more cost to the Nexplanon and the IUD. Okay. You're already planning to have a kid, maybe not right now. So even though the birth control pill is not as
it's a lot
effective, it's going to be covered. So maybe that is the balance that we achieve for you.
That's fair.
And I guess we should jump in right now to say that there is a compassionate program for the Mirena IUD.
Oh.
As far as I know, there isn't one for the copper IUD, or if there is, I haven't been made aware of it. I think the Nexplanon, there is one coming, but I don't think it's fully up and running yet. So that can be a barrier for Nexplanon, but for IUD, if someone's out there, they're like, I love the idea, I want it, I'm sure it's going to be great for me, I can't afford it, there are ways to access it.
I don't remember how much the IUD was and the Nexplanon. I'm after forgetting. Do you know off the top of your head how much those cost? Because it's not covered.
I think around $300
each.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine was covered.
Mine was covered.
The Nexplanon was covered on my
I don't
insurance.
remember. Maybe it was.
You had to check. Like we were told to check,
maybe
but it wasn't.
It was the Marina that wasn't covered.
Yeah,
I don't know. It doesn't matter. I was going to pay whatever I had to pay.
Priceless. What about so we talked about the other ones. So the pill.
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons of the pill as your main form of contraception?
Is Depo lumped in with the pill in terms of...
No. And
okay. Is that like a totally different...
So in my mind, again, we're kind of going through this in my own mental approach to contraception. Depo is the next one that I think about.
Okay.
So one of the things is that if you're reading about contraception, you'll see LARCs and SARCs. So LARC is long-acting reversible contraceptive.
Okay.
So that is your Nexplanon and your IUD. They last for years, but they're reversible. SARCs are your short-acting reversible. So that's like the pill, you have to take it every day. Depo is right in the middle. It's kind of like a MARC. It's a medium-acting because it lasts for 3 months.
And is that a shot?
That is a shot that you get every 3 months.
In your butt, right?
Well, anywhere. It's an intramuscular, so it doesn't have to be in your butt.
I got mine in my butt. There has not been, or like somewhere close to my butt, there has not been a birth control method that I have not tried.
I didn't know.
You've not had any good experience.
No, they hate me.
That's interesting. Is that a hormonal thing? I know we can't answer that without like going through your chart, but like, could it be a hormonal? What is that?
That's one of those things that gets... That's probably like, again, 1,000 years in the future when we can like take a blood sample and do like personalized medicine based on your genes and proteins. And there's so much that goes into that.
Yeah.
It's the genes that you're born with, and then epigenetics, which is the changes to your genes that occur because of environmental exposures. There's expectations, there's goals, there's environmental exposures just on a day-to-day basis.
Interesting.
There's what you're eating, what your health status is, what other conditions that you have. So I think... Why, Jess? We'll never know.
Yeah.
No, and this was like 15 years ago. And the reason why I tried the needle was because the Depo was because so I learned about this migraine with aura. So then the birth control that was prescribed me was a pill. I don't remember the name of it. I think Micronor.
Yes.
And so you had to take it at the exact same time every single day.
I would never.
Okay. So,
right.
You're true. So that is also, there is a new kit on the market for that. So for people who cannot have estrogen, there is a progesterone only pill called Slind. It has a longer half-life, so if you forget by a day, you're okay.
Okay.
So that's a brand new kit. But yes, Micronor, it has to be within this 4 hours every day, which is crazy.
Rough. That was too hard. I was in like school, like college. Like I couldn't remember anything. So I was like, okay, I need something else that's a little bit more like time forgiving. So got the needle, but then I bled constantly. So I was like, this is... the opposite of why I got the pill, so I could have sex without pregnancy. Like, what the hell? So that's why I didn't take that anymore. And then I think I went rogue for a while. I don't think I went on anything. I didn't. I played with fire until I got pregnant with Logan.
Get burned.
Until I got
yes, you did.
Until I got pregnant with Logan, and then I got the IUD.
Yeah.
But yeah, I gave up after a while.
So in terms of Depo, is that like you were saying, copper IUD is prevent pregnancy, full stop?
Yeah.
Is Depo?
So Depo, if it's, again, when we're studying for our exams, we study the perfect use and the typical use.
Okay.
And perfect use is in the lab. You can't screw this up. Typical use is human use.
Yeah.
So we say it's about 94% effective in pregnancy. So it's a really good contraceptive. But like Jess said, the thing is that it causes really irregular bleeding for 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
For some people, even longer, but most people will either have just very light periods or no period at all after that.
And then you have to get a needle every 3 months.
Which can be really inconvenient or a huge barrier to care if accessing care is not an easy thing.
Exactly.
So Depo is good again for periods, for managing periods. It is one that can actually decrease the incidence of seizures. So somebody who has epilepsy, I might be a bit more keen to really encourage this. And it can decrease the incidence of sickle cell crises if you have sickle cell anemia. So there's a specific group of patients where this is an amazing option.
Right.
But beyond that, it's one I find with Depo, people either love it or they hate it. So
I feel like that's with every birth
it
control.
is, but a Depo is even stronger. Like Depo is really like
So interesting.
We did have one question on IUD. Someone did ask, what are symptoms you can have if you're allergic or think you're allergic to your IUD?
Can you be allergic to it?
I have never heard that. I mean,
Okay.
theoretically, you can be allergic to pretty much anything. You're not going to be allergic to progesterone because it's in your body.
Right.
Like,
what about the
that's not
material
right.
it's made
But
of?
copper is a problem.
Yeah.
So I would think that would be a high risk for copper.
okay.
To answer whoever's question, I think I'd need a bit more detail about what symptoms that you're having, but that would be exceedingly rare to the point that it's not listed as a contraindication, which makes it incredibly rare.
And then I think you answered this already, but just to see the best contraception options for those who get hormonal migraines. I think we talked about that, right?
So basically, if you're getting hormonal migraines, if you're getting migraines with aura, like we talked about, no estrogen for you.
Right.
If you get headaches, migraines associated with your period, but you don't have the aura, pretty much any of these are an option for you because what we're just going to do is regulate your cycle.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so I think we did touch on that.
You can basically anything that we're talking about today, have at her.
Right. So any of those are an option.
Minus the
if
copper
you do get
or the
hormonal
tubal or the
migraines.
vasectomy because they're not going to alter your cycle. The
Right.
problem with the hormonal migraines is it's a response to your cycle. Like your cycle, we always vilify estrogen, progesterone. It drives me crazy. They're good. They're in your body. They do a lot of good things. But sometimes we can have problems with them.
Right.
When we have problems with them, what we do is not get rid of your estrogen, get rid of your progesterone. We regulate those ups and downs. We regulate the valleys.
Right.
So it's not necessarily not us having it. It's the peaks.
It's your body's response to the up and down.
Right. Interesting.
So smoothing that out can help with hormonal migraine.
Right.
So I tend to like to put people either on a progesterone only pill if they have migraine with aura or a combined hormonal contraceptive pill if they don't, because those are the most effective for inhibiting ovulation. But any of these are a good option if you have hormonal migraine. So
good to know.
Don't feel inhibited. Beyond, if you have aura, you do not get estrogen.
Right.
Okay. We can't say that enough. If you have aura, no estrogen for you.
No,
So
not
is
allowed.
Nexplanon
is progesterone.
so that you can do that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily stop your bleeding. You'll have varying experiences with the bleeding when it comes to that one.
Yes. And we'll probably get into it more next time when we're talking about periods. And when we talk about periods and why they happen and how they happen, I think this episode will make a bit more sense.
Yes.
In terms of the effects of progesterone and estrogen. But long story short, estrogen makes the lining of your uterus grow to get ready for a baby.
Okay.
Progesterone keeps the lining stable or thins it out.
Okay. That's good to know.
We love the progesterone.
Yeah.
We love progesterone, but if you're on it for a really long time, your lining might get so thin that it almost gets unstable. And then you have irregular bleeding.
Right.
Or if you've got a thick lining, when you're starting out with the IUD or the Nexplanon or Depo, you got to get to that thin lining.
Yeah.
Right. So you're to get the
Okay, I think that's a good myth buster to talk about them, because when you start a new contraceptive method, how long do you typically recommend patients kind of try it out before
3 to
saying
6
this
months.
isn't for me?
Do not call me before 3 to 6 months. I mean,
3 to 6 months.
You can always call me. Yeah, I am going to tell you, give it 3 to 6 months because you don't actually know what's going to happen.
So we don't really know the full scope until you're through that waiting period of getting adjusted in those 3 to 6 month period.
Exactly. And for the combined hormonal contraceptives, so that's the pill, the patch, and the ring, that actually, they tend to get better as well in that 3 to 6 month period,
so
as well as the side effects of like nausea, headaches, breast tenderness that you get with the pill. That gets better in that 3 to 6 month window.
Right.
So not discounting. It sucks for 3 to 6 months, but keep your eyes on the prize.
Yeah.
So that you just mentioned so many more forms of birth control that I didn't even think of. So let's
maybe
so
we should
Depo
make
and then,
a little pamphlet to put on the Insta.
honestly, that's a good idea.
We should.
So so we talked about
We did tubal and vasectomy, so the permanent.
Yeah.
Then we did the LARCs, which is the IUD and the Nexplanon. We did I'm calling it up, Mark, the Depo.
Okay, I have one question about that from the audience that we didn't ask
Let's
yet.
do it.
Was in terms of your experience with patients or how you feel about patients getting the needle, like a pro and a con of that really quickly. What does that look like?
It's a very variable experience.
Yeah.
Pro is that it's a really great contraceptive. And if you're willing to wait it out, if you are willing to accept that for 3 to 6 months, your periods might be crazy. At the end of those 3 to 6 months, you are looking at not having a period, fibroids getting smaller, endometriosis getting better, painful periods getting better, flow getting less or non-existent. But for some people, waiting those 3 to 6 months just isn't an option.
Right.
The other thing that we talked about a little bit before is that there is a delayed return to fertility.
Okay.
So if you want to get pregnant soon, not for you.
Okay.
Is it a year? Is it?
It's not always a year. It can be up to a year.
Yeah.
That's worst case scenario.
Yeah,
but
that's worth
always
noting,
assume
I
that
think.
you are. If it's really important to get pregnant, assume that you're going to be the worst case scenario, then you're not going to panic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And the other thing that people might read about with Depo, if you type it into Google, you're going to see things about the reduction in bone mineral density. That really scared us off using it for a long time. But now we've got new, better, more robust studies that have showed that it's transient. It's reversible. And when you stop the Depo, your bone mineral density goes back to normal within 2 years.
Interesting.
And it's actually the amount that it decreases is the same that the amount that your bone mineral density decreases in pregnancy or breastfeeding.
Oh,
Interesting.
So that for me is
brittle
really
bones.
not a concern.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless you're somebody who is already at risk of osteoporosis or osteopenia.
Right.
That's really not a concern for most of us. If you're worried about it, but you love the idea of Depo, get your calcium, get your vitamin D, do your exercise.
There's ways to help that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Depo, now we're looking at the next level.
The combined hormonal contraceptives and the progesterone only pill, which we kind of talked about quickly, the Micronor and the Slind. They are just the pill, but it's only progesterone. It's no estrogen with it. And so they're a bit less forgiving in terms of forgetting them. With Micronor, it's very unforgiving. It has to be within the same 4 hours every day. With Slind, you do have about a day.
Okay.
With
So
that
why
said,
would, okay.
they're great because it doesn't affect your milk supply for breastfeeding.
Oh.
If you can't have estrogens for whatever reason, but you don't want Depo or the IUD or the next put on, it's a great option as well. And some people just with the estrogen, they do get some side effects from it and they just want the progesterone only pill and then it's great. Honestly, I love Slind. I'm putting more and more patients on it who want progesterone only pills. I really like it. It's a good drug.
Okay.
Next.
And then now we're getting into the combined hormonal contraceptives. So this just means it's an estrogen and a progesterone.
Is it fair to say that these are the ones people start off with first?
Yes.
I feel like yes.
Yes.
Because I feel like we've all been there.
Yeah.
We've all been there. And it's the pill.
Is there a reason for that? Yeah.
Oh, it's the standard. Like this
just
is,
what
this
it-
is
yeah.
the granddaddy. Like
Yeah.
this is what
The granddaddy.
started.
Yeah.
It is our little workhorse. And it does a great job. It prevents pregnancy. It does help with periods. It does help with fibroids. It does help with endometriosis and chronic pain. Like you hear horror stories and we all love to shit on the pill. Can I say that?
Yes.
Of course you can.
We curse on here all the time.
But it's a great little thing. It's revolutionized a lot of lives.
So that's the combined.
The combined, yes. So that's estrogen and progesterone. So that's why if you have any reason that you can't have estrogen, unfortunately, these
So is
are
that
not
like
for you.
the Yasmin, the
Yasmin, Marvelon, Lolo, Tricyclin, Mervola.
tricycline low?
I
Is
know
it the same
it's all
thing?
just brands, but it's all made with the same things.
Yes and no. They all have estrogen and progesterone, but it's different estrogens and progesterones. It's different generations.
Okay.
At the end of the day, and different dosing of them. So that's why if you're on the pill and you like the idea of the pill, but maybe you're getting some breakthrough bleeding, we might switch you up
Okay.
to something that if it's that your lining is too thin, maybe we give you a bit more estrogen. If it's because your lining's too unstable, maybe we give you a bit more progesterone.
Okay.
So it's nice to have all those on the market because we can play a little bit.
Right.
And we can try to
Because everyone's
find the right
different.
pill for you. And some of them have anti-androgenic effects. So that's anti-testosterone effects. So that makes them really good for acne.
Oh, okay.
Yasmin, Diane, those are all really good
Okay.
if you have problems with acne.
I feel like when we were in high school, we were probably visiting Jill's mom for some of this stuff.
Oh, probably.
God bless Jill's
Mom ran she was the doctor at the Sydney Academy Youth Health Center.
Yes.
And
My friends right now are probably laughing. Like, oh, I know her.
Mom's
She
probably
packed up my
laughing.
brown bag.
Yeah.
She packed up the brown bag.
Again, shout out
Brown
to Jill's
paper
mom.
bag.
So, and again, coming to the teenage years or starting these pills, and this may be just my experience, and it may be totally off base for me to say this, but I'm going to ask it and you can debunk it. I say that the pill never worked for me because it made me a raging lunatic. It affected my mood. I was short-tempered. I was bitchy. Was that the pill's fault or was that just my teenage angst? Like, what is that fair to say that could have been?
It's possible, but it's hard to say because often it's like the weight gain. often we are starting the pill in a time of kind of upheaval of teenage angst, or you're going to university for the first time.
Right.
Which makes it something that's really hard to study.
Right.
Right. Because
so many
it's hard to
varying
isolate
factors. Yeah.
that. There's so many things that can affect our mood. There's so many things that can affect our weight. And there's so many things that can affect our period beyond just hormones.
Right.
That it's really hard to isolate.
Right.
So it is totally possible.
Okay.
We'll never know.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And so I tend to play it safe. If people have had a bad experience, we're not going to try it again unless they really want to.
Right.
But if someone had a bad experience and came to me and said, I really want to try it again, I wouldn't say no.
Okay.
Right.
That clears it up, I think. Like, I know for me, on it, I was not great. I didn't feel good. And off it, I felt much better in that same time period of my life, So for me, it was just like, okay, this isn't it.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way with the Nexplanon. Like, I didn't feel that same.
And so probably,
but it was
again,
also
you're
a
at different stage in your
totally
life,
different
so
life stage. Yeah,
we'll never know.
Exactly.
That's
okay.
the long and the short of it is we will We're never going to be able to go back and know. I definitely think it does have an effect on mood, and some people are more sensitive than others.
Right.
And unfortunately, you don't know until you try.
Yeah. Yeah. Trial and error. Trial and error.
The other thing with combined hormonal contraceptives is that it's not always just a pill. There is the patch. It's a little patch that goes on your skin. It stays on for a week and you replace it once a week. So generally we say on Sundays you replace it.
Does it stay on
for most
through everything?
For most people, yes.
Okay.
For some people, they do have issues with it falling off. If you're someone who's a big swimmer,
just got the fear.
Just got the fear
why
again.
Risk it? Why risk
because
it?
It works great for some people. So it's again, you try it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Beyond the tubal and the vasectomy, nothing that we're talking about today is permanent.
So
if it's
the trial and error.
You are interested in, but you're a bit worried, try it. We can stop the pill. We can not give you another needle with the depot. We can take up the IUD.
So there's no harm in trying.
There's no harm in trying.
Yeah.
You're better off to try and know, okay, that didn't work.
Right.
Or it did, and then you found something that works for you.
Talk to me about the NuvaRing. I feel like, I don't know if I've ever known
NuvaRing is really underappreciated.
Is it?
Unfortunately, it's a little silicone ring. It folds right in half. You put it in the vagina and it stays there for 3 weeks. You take it out for a week and then you have a period. Or like with the pill or the patch, you can run it back to back if you don't want to have a period.
Oh.
But people,
you insert it yourself?
You insert it yourself, but if you can insert a tampon, you can insert a NuvaRing.
Jury's still out if we do that right or not.
Yeah. I just had another question, but I'm going to save it for periods.
No, now we need
the
to know.
Diva cup.
Well, that was my question. Is can you use the NuvaRing and the Diva cup at the same time?
Yeah. Are people using Diva cup? Like, I feel like, is that the new? Is that the modern?
People are.
Okay. Yeah.
Is it more hygienically? That's a question for the period episode.
Yeah, we're going to save that one because that's definitely a period.
Yeah.
It's really, you can keep it in during sex. They shouldn't feel it. It's really underutilized, or not necessarily underutilized. I think all of us are happy to prescribe it.
Is it NuvaRing Diva cup? Or
yeah,
is
you
it,
would put the NuvaRing in first.
And will they touch each other?
They will. And if there's any effect, like,
do they cuddle?
If they do cuddle.
Okay.
And if the NuvaRing came out when you were taking out the Diva cup, you just put it back in.
Okay.
And people who don't want it in for sex, you can take it out for a short period of time and then put it back in.
You pee, it doesn't come out.
Doesn't come out.
You have a big bowel movement, doesn't come out. Like, what's the...
Yeah. Again, just like with the patch, there is a small group of people where it will fall out, particularly if you have had a bunch of kids, if you have some degree of prolapse.
Okay.
But most people know. Most people know. And again, you're never going to know until you try. So if this is interesting to you, don't be worried.
Yeah.
Try it.
And it's silicone, did you say? Or what's it?
Yes, I'm quite sure. I'm just going to...
Yeah.
For everyone listening, I've got
I'm just
my
wondering about that allergy question. Like, interesting. What's the material you're putting in your body?
True.
I feel like I always question that. I had the same question with the next one on.
Let me pull it up.
All right.
So the NuvaRing is a copolymer ethylene vinyl acetate flexible ring. There you go.
Say that 10 times fast.
Copolymer ethylene.
Pardon me?
Copolymer ethylene vinyl acetate.
Jesus.
Well, the last question, and we could just really touch on this quickly, Jill, because I think people need to know if it's effective or when to use it and when not to use it. But we did have a question from a listener that asked if the basal body temperature technique is a reliable method of contraception.
As long as you don't care if you get pregnant.
So
it has a 25% typical use failure rate. So
that's a big she high.
The problem with basal body temperature, both for contraception and for fertility planning, is that thermoregulation, which is your body's ability to control your temperature, is not just affected by ovulation. It's affected by many, many things that you can't control. Mm-hmm. Did you have a bad night's sleep?
Right.
And now you're checking your temperature. Things like that can impact it.
How do you even check your temperature the same way we would check like our kids' temperature?
Exactly.
Is it like
why is it called the basal body temperature?
In the bum, in the mouth?
It's your baseline,
in your
temperature. And it's a 0.5 degrees Celsius rise. It's not like all of a sudden you jump 3 degrees. Like it's a small, minor rise.
And is the thought behind it, if it rises, you ovulate?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
LH causes your body temperature to go up by 0.5 degrees Celsius. So you can use it as long as you're not going to be devastated.
So people typically I've heard people using it when trying to get pregnant. Obviously, the reverse must be true too. I never thought about it that way, but that's what this person is asking is it reliable when you're not trying to get pregnant and it's not super reliable?
No. So any of the ovulation or any of the natural family planning methods, so basal body temperature, cervical mucus, ovulation kits, again, about a 25% failure. The other way to look at that is 75% chance of success.
Right. Which
depends on how you're feeling about if you could get pregnant again. Jessica would just about die if she tried to use this method.
Right. And then I check my temperature every day.
What about the pull-out method? No, I'm just kidding.
And it does it's a lot of work because you have to do it every single day. And it can be a lot of stress.
So the reverse, like if you're trying to start a family and you're doing all of these things, it may bring you comfort because you feel like you have some control over it, but it may also add undue stress to the process.
Yes. And we'll do a fertility episode at some point. We'll get into that.
We will.
Don't stress yourselves out. Okay, I do have the answer. Mirena is made of polyethylene.
Copper. A man-made thing.
That is a man-made thing. I know you and I hate this.
I know.
Sarah. The Nexplanon is again made of the ethylene vinyl acetate copolymer.
Okay.
And copper IUD is polyethylene and barium sulfate with copper around it.
So interesting.
So, it is, I guess that in a way answers if you're allergic to it, it's more likely to be the copper because copper and barium you definitely can be allergic to. But these polyethylene copolymer vinyl acetate, that's in the water, that's in the air, it is
pretty
ubiquitous.
Low allergen. We did have a question, I think, because we're just talking about, or maybe this will be our last one before we wrap up, but we're talking about the combined hormonal forms of contraception, which includes estrogen. And we've been saying a few times throughout this episode that if you can't have estrogen, you don't take these things. And what are some reasons why people may not be able to have this additional estrogen in their contraceptive methods? Maybe we'll start there.
Yeah. The big one is small but possible risk of stroke or heart attack. So basically people who are at elevated risk for that. Most of us aren't, but migraine with aura is a risk factor for stroke. Okay. If you've already had a stroke or a heart attack, not for you. Okay. And if you have any sort of, again, the list is quite long, but there are certain cardiac diseases that would not be a good idea. So people who have cardiac disease, this is probably not going to be for you.
Okay.
Certain liver problems, because they can be sensitive to the estrogen in it.
Okay.
And then the other one will be the hormone sensitive breast cancer. So that's the big ones. You can get really into the nitty gritty here about blood pressure, high blood pressure that's not controlled, diabetes with end organ effects. But then we're all really getting into the weeds. And I think if you're somebody who is medically complicated, this is something that you need to talk to your family doctor about, and you're likely going to be referred to a gynecologist, because if you have a lot of medical complications, if you have really complex medical conditions, this is all very generic level that we're talking about. And for some people, it's not very generic. It's not very simple. It's a very complex question. It's a complex risk-benefit analysis.
Right.
So those would be the big ones that are common, but keep in mind there's a lot of other ones that are less common that are floating around. So if you're somebody who's out there with a bunch of medical issues or a bunch of rare medical issues or even one, you might not be a candidate. Don't be surprised if you're told no.
Okay. And going back to the breast cancer or hormone, did you say hormone induced?
Hormone sensitive.
Hormone sensitive breast cancer. So that's one type of breast cancer that includes multiple types of breast cancer. There is non-hormone sensitive breast cancers?
Yeah. So not a breast doctor, not a general surgeon. That's a fun little common misconception about gynecology. Don't do breast health. But some breast cancers the breast cancer cells have receptors for estrogen and progesterone. We call these ER, estrogen receptor, PR, progesterone receptor positive breast cancers. And what that means is those little receptors on the cell can bind to estrogen and progesterone, and that induces them to replicate.
Cool. Okay.
So if you are someone who has one of these cancers or who has had one of these cancers, this could induce a recurrence.
Okay.
So you don't get to have it.
Okay.
So it doesn't cause?
No. So cancer is caused by a cell that is mutated, and mutations can come from genetics. We think about the BRCA1 and 2 genes. It can come from environmental exposures like radiation, or it can come from random mutations that we all accumulate through our lives. Then that cell takes off and starts replicating. If it has those receptors on it, it can encourage it to grow, but it didn't cause it. It was the mutation that caused it. And estrogen and progesterone don't cause the mutation.
Right.
And that is something patients would be told if they had the cancer removed and that was the biopsy was done and they said it has estrogen receptors, etc. No estrogen for you moving forward. Those are things that would come out in that care plan.
Yes. And my experience with the general surgeons here is that and the oncologists here is that they're really excellent in saying, this is not for you. The patients who can't have it come to me knowing that.
Yeah.
They are very well aware.
Right. Good. Okay. I think that's helpful,
Yeah,
right? Like there's I think there's a lot of myths and misconceptions and worries and stressors
Yes, and
around
I think if
that.
we're talking about cancer, I think one thing that didn't come up that I really did mean to talk about today is that a lot of these methods can actually decrease your risk
Oh my
of
goodness.
cancers. So we know that the risk of ovarian cancer is decreased if you've been on the pill for more than 10 years by up to 50%.
Just the pill?
I would assume the opposite.
The IUD can protect you, and it can actually be used to treat endometrial cancer.
What?
Depo-Provera can decrease your risk of ovarian and endometrial cancer. So we've always associated hormones bad cancer, but actually these things are protective.
That is really important to say. I would say like I'm a non-interventionist. Like I try to like not take things if I don't need to, or I worry about the side effects, or like what we talked about this earlier before we pressed record, like why ruin a good thing? Like, if things are going okay, like you don't want to mess with it. But sometimes an intervention may actually be beneficial or proactive or helpful.
And if you are someone who's going to be at high risk, particularly of endometrial cancer, people who have PCOS and they're not having a period, like they go more than 3 months, IUD is the way to go. Okay. It is used to treat endometrial cancer. It sure as heck will prevent it.
Wow.
So if you're someone with PCOS, or if you're someone who has irregular cycles, you go more than 3 months, start thinking about that IUD.
We say this every time we talk to Jill, Jess, but like we don't know any of these things.
Oh, I know.
None of this stuff is talked
amazing.
about enough. It's incredible.
What did we learn in sex ed?
Dr. Jill, nothing. How to put a condom on a banana. I don't even know if we learned that.
I don't feel like I learned that.
Don't have sex if you don't want a baby. That was the extent of it. And tampons or pads. I don't even know. Nothing. Yeah. We didn't learn anything.
I do remember like exercise helps with period cramps.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, true, but
the heating pad also works.
Yeah. Unless you can't physically exercise because you're in so much pain.
Yeah. We had another great episode with Dr. Jill, the good doctor.
Thank you. One sec. Let's see. Yay! Round of applause for Dr. Jill.
As long as it wasn't the one.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that one. What about this one? Yeah. Dr. Jill, thank you so much for joining us around the table again. Thank you for allowing us to come to your beautiful table and chat with you.
I love having you guys.
Thanks for the champagne.
Then
you're welcome.
Next time we see Dr. Jill, will be very excited. A live whining guy.
Oh my God.
By the time you're listening to this episode, it's probably like a week or two away. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, you better get them.
If there's any left.
It might be sold out, and if so, we apologize. But we'll see you live in person at Island Folk Cidery.
And 6:30 p.m.
I might be a little like jet lagged.
You're gonna.
It's okay.
Dr. Jill, tell them where you're coming home from.
I'm coming home from Italy.
You're getting on a plane.
I'm getting on a plane.
Flying home from Italy and coming to talk to the morning meeting.
I hope I give you guys good information. The other thing we just should add is we can't answer personal health questions.
That's right.
At this, just because that takes a history and a physical.
Absolutely.
And
that's right. This is a chance.
We just don't have time for that. And I don't think Island Folk Cider wants me to set up a gynae table there.
No. Yeah. So we'll see you live at the Live Wine and Guy with Dr. Jill. And Alana's going to meet us there as well from Kappa Physiotherapy to join Dr. Jill on the panel. Jess and I will be asking them all the questions you want us to ask them. There'll be a chance to ask your own questions to them, both on the mic or anonymously. We
might do some
little pieces of paper to write on.
Confessionals mocktails.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun. We're going to have live music.
got
We're
one.
going to have yummy drinks, both mocktails and cocktails, whatever you prefer. It's going to be a good time.
It's going to be good.
We finally get to do our live wine and
I feel
dine.
like this has been in the works for forever.
F you, COVID. We're freaking doing it.
We're doing it. We're doing the damn
Relocation.
thing.
I feel like that was something that we talked about maybe doing the very first time we all sat around this table.
It is. It is.
And then COVID decided
circle.
to.
It's 3
Full
seasons.
circle,
But
though.
here we are.
Here we are.
So thank you, Dr. Jill. We'll see you at Island Folk for our next live Wine and Gyne. And then our next recording of Wine and Gyne will be diving into the world of periods. How
Can't
fun.
Yes.
We'll
So
see you then.
think of your questions.
Yeah, get your questions
There's going
in.
to be many, I think.
Check Insta. We'll put them on. Oh, yeah. That's going to be a hot topic. I have all kinds of
We're
questions.
ready for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to give a little teaser. One of my main questions is I feel like my cycle shortened by a week all of a sudden. And I wonder if that happens in old age. So we will get to that on the next episode of The Wine and Gyne. Thank you, Jill. Jess, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you guys for having me. It's
We'll
always fun to be here.
You're the best and we appreciate you. And we'll see you all at the next Wine and Gyne. Take care. Thank you for joining us around the table on this episode of The Morning Meeting with Sarah and Jess. If you're enjoying your time around the table, if you like what you're hearing, tell us, tell a friend. Wherever you listen to your podcast, you can like and subscribe. You can rate and review. We would appreciate it. It helps us. Help us help you. Make sure to subscribe so you never have to miss another morning meeting. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.